In this episode, I will make a quick explanation of the tools that we have in Photoshop. So let's get started by opening an image. You can open any image you have on your computer, but on the stock images, you can choose any image. I will choose, let's say, maybe this one. But as I said, you can choose any image. It's just to have something to work with here. Now, the tools bar is located on the left side of the interface, usually by default, but as I said, you can move it wherever you want. When we created this workspace, we set it here on the left side. So let's start with the top tool. Maybe the most important tool in Photoshop is the move tool. You select it by pressing the V key on the keyboard, and it's used to move things around. Right now, this layer is locked because it's a background layer, and when you try to move it, it's going to ask you if you want to turn it into a normal layer. I'm going to choose yes, and this is used to move objects on your canvas. Remember that I said when you change the tools from here, the options bar here on top will change. So each tool has its own set of settings. I'm not going to go through all of them because the video will be too long, and most of them are really easy to understand how they work. So for the move tool, we have the select and the group, so you can auto select any of the layers. My advice is to leave this unchecked, and that's it. You can choose the show transform controls, but I usually don't have that. So basically, if you have that checked, when you select the move tool, you can automatically make this smaller or bigger, or if you right click, you will have this on. So otherwise you will have to press the Control or Command T to enter this mode. So if you uncheck this and you want to see those controls, you have to press Command T or Control T. This will load what's called the free transform tool, and this allows you to move things around. So you can make the image or the object bigger or smaller, or you can enter the transform mode, which allows you to create this kind of distortions on your image and create all sorts of weird things. Next, we have the selection tools. I'm not going to go into deep explanation because on the next episode I will talk about selections. So first we have the marquee tools, then we have the smart selection tools, which are the quick selection and the magic wand, and then we have the lasso tools. I'm going to explain this in more depth on the next episode, so I'm going to skip them for now. Then we have the crop tool. The crop tool is used to make your canvas smaller. Remember, the canvas is your work area. Right now, my canvas, if I were to save this image, if I press Option Command I or Alt Control I, my canvas has a size of 3600 pixels by 2431 pixels. So this is the size of my canvas. If I want this image to be smaller, I have to change the canvas size, and for that I can use the crop tool, or I can go to image and choose canvas size, and from here I can change that. With the crop tool, you can have different aspect ratios. So from here, from this drop down, you see I can make the image square. Obviously part of the image will be lost, and if you check the delete cropped pixels, they will be lost forever. But if you uncheck this, when I press enter, the image is not lost because now I can move this. Okay, so the image is still there, only that it's outside my canvas. Next, we have the perspective crop. This is used, for example, if you have an image of a street and you have buildings going into the distance and you want to crop one of them. Let me just make a quick demonstration. So you would trace the building like that, which is going into the distance, and have something like that. When you press enter, let me just move this here so you can see, hopefully understand what this does. If you press enter, Photoshop is gonna flip it and make it look straight. So that's what this tool does. I rarely use it. And then we have the slice tools, which are more for web designers. I'm gonna skip that. Then we have the frame, I think it's called the frame tool. I'm gonna create a new layer by clicking here. And when you create a frame like this, it's just going to create a box like that, and it's creating you can see it's creating a new layer. And basically what you can do with that, I'm just going to go to my stock images folder. It creates like a container, and now I can grab an image from here, let's say this one, Control Tab or Command Tab, and if I let go the image here, it's gonna fill that square with my image. So it just creates this thing which I can now make bigger if I want to, and then I can select the image and make the image bigger. With Control T I can make it bigger, and it's still contained into this box which I created. So that's what this tool does. Next we have the Eyedropper tool, which we rarely use like this. We almost never select it from here because this is basically used to sample colors. So if I click here, you can see that here on this squares, which are my foreground and background colors, when I click, it's going to add the sampled color to my foreground color. If I click and hold, on the bottom you will see I have the previously sampled color, and on the top, as I'm moving here, you can see it's going to change the color, and they put it there just so that I can compare them. So that's what this tool does. I say that we rarely use it like this because when you, for example, have the brush tool selected and you want to paint with, let's say you want to paint with this color of the woman's jeans. With the brush tool selected, press and hold the Option key, and it's going to temporarily switch to the eyedropper. So I can sample, it added that color over there, and now I can paint with that. Alt click and paint with that color, alt click and paint with that color. So that's a quicker use, that's a quicker access to the eyedropper tool. These are called the measurements tool and tools, and you can, for example, have the ruler tool, which allows you to measure things on your image. Just click and drag, and here on the top you can see the width and the height of your selection. I almost never use this tool. The note tool is used to add a note on your image. So if you want to send this to someone, you can add a note there, and that's it. And when they click that, they will see that note over there. And what else? We have the count tool, which is used to count objects on your image. So if you have several objects and you want to count them, just by clicking you can count things. And of course you can change the color. If you have multiple objects, you can create you can create groups, and each group can have its own colors so that you can distinguish multiple objects on your image. Let me undo that and move on. Then we have the healing tools. I'm gonna skip these ones for now because I have an episode where I talked about how to clean an image. I think it's episode 13 or something like that. And from here I'm going to explain what each of these tools do. The red eye tool is simply to remove red eyes from photographs, really simple. And then we have the brush tool, one of the most important tools in Photoshop. You can access it by pressing the B key. By the way, here on the right side of each tool you can see if they have an assigned keyboard shortcut, you will see it here. In case of the brush, is the B key. The brush tool is simply used to paint. You can right click to change the size of it and the hardness of the edges. So this is with the hard edge and this is with the soft edge, really self-explanatory. And from here this is like a history, so you can see the last used brushes. You can also change the shape of it to create something like that, or rotate it. Now this is a round brush, so you will not be able to tell if I rotate it, but you can have different brushes. Like for example, this is a tree brush that I created myself, and you can download brushes from the internet, so you can create a tree like that. Let me just make the size of it bigger. You can change the size with the keyboard shortcuts with the brackets, but for some reason it never worked for me. So let's right click and just increase the size from here. This is the reset button. It's going to reset the size to the original size of the brush, of how it was saved. So you can paint like that. You can rotate this and paint it on a different angle. And the power of the brushes comes from the brushes panel, actually. If you go to Window and choose Brush Settings, you will open this panel which allows you to customize your brush. So let's say I have this tree brush over here. I'm going to drop the size of it a little to make it just a little smaller. From here you can increase the spacing of the brush. So I can create trees like that. You can also activate these checkboxes here, for example, shape dynamics. I can increase the size jitter, which allows me to create randomly sized brushes, well, trees. I can also change the angle, so I can create random angles and random sizes as well. I can also add scattering, which allows me to separate things and create something like that. I can also add color dynamics, so I can randomly colorize this. Let's say I want to increase the saturation and the brightness, and it's going to create different colors. These colors are affected by this, by the colors that you have on the foreground and background. Okay, so it's going to depend on that and the settings that you add here. So it's a really powerful tool. Just play with it and see what you do. Brush pose, I don't even know what this is. Yeah, this is if you have a graphic tablet that recognizes the angle where you paint, and you can make it behave on a different way depending on how you tilt your pen. Okay, so just play with this brush settings option here. Is really a cool thing to do. Let's move on. Then we have the pencil tool, which is exactly like the brush, but it just has hard edges. I never use this tool. Then we have the color replacement and the mixer brush. The color replacement, I'm gonna skip it because I never used it in my life. I don't even know what it does. The mixer brush tool is used to soften things. I have more in-depth tutorials about this on my YouTube channel. But basically what you do is just mix textures based on the settings that you have right here on top. If you check this, which is called clean the brush after each stroke, what you can do is soften the texture. Just blend them together and create something like this. I use this sometimes to smoothen skin with really low settings there. If you uncheck that, you're gonna start to like just mix things here. It's a really cool tool to make some special effects. And what else? Next, we have the clone stamp and the pattern stamp. The clone stamp I'm going to talk when I talk about cleaning images in Photoshop. By the way, when you hover over a tool, if you have Photoshop CC, you will see a quick demo of that tool. The pattern stamp, it's just used to paint with a texture. So here on the top, you will see the texture selector, and you can paint with a texture like that. You can change presets whenever you see this wheel. If you click it, you will see a list, which allows you to change how to visualize them. And you can load or save or replace. And here you have a list with default textures, but as I said, you can download from the internet and then load them. Click OK, and you can see you can paint with these textures. That's what it does. Next, we have the history brush and the art history brush tool. I never use this. Maybe I used them twice in 10 years of Photoshop experience that I have now. The eraser tool is simply used to erase stuff on your image. And that's pretty much it. The reason why you see blue is because my background is set to blue and I have this locked. If I unlock it, you will see the checkerboard. Okay. And then we have the background eraser tool, which basically just gets, it should recognize, yeah, if you start paint here, you see it's kind of started recognizes the edges on there, and it's gonna not erase them. But it's not an effective tool to actually delete the background, but there you have it. And then you have the magic eraser, which is just like the magic wand. If you click, it's gonna delete that color of the whole image. Tools I never use, just the eraser tool. Then we have the gradient tool. This tool, I don't use it really that often like this. I use it on layer masks, but basically what it does is just creates a gradient. And when you work with gradients, you always have the same settings. You have the gradient type. You can have it like that. You can have it like that. You can have it circular or linear, or diamond, like so. Now, you have the blend modes. Usually we set on normal, and then you can reverse it, so you can paint it like that. And of course, this is the gradient editor. When you click it, you can open this and have your gradients here. Again, you will see this wheel, which allows you to change presets from here, and these are presets that come with Photoshop. Again, you can download from the internet and load them from here, and you can also create your own. If you change the gradient type from solid to noise, you will see this randomize button, which allows you to just randomly change things, and you can change the roughness and have stuff like that and create some weird things in here which you may or may not like. And what else? Let's move on. Let me just undo this. Then we have the paint bucket tool, which allows you to fill the image with a color. If you have a layer like this, it's gonna fill it's just like the magic wand tool. It just recognizes this yellow and it's gonna try to change it. But if you have an empty layer, it's gonna just fill the whole layer with the color that you have on the foreground here. I never use this because usually if I want to fill a layer, I just press Option and Backspace, and that's just going to fill my layer. And then we have the 3D material drop, which I'm not going to explain because I'm not using the 3D functions in Photoshop. Then we have the blur tool. I want to zoom in here so that you can see it better. The blur tool is simply just, I'm painting on a new layer. It's just going to blur your image. Let's set this to normal. And when you paint, it's going to throw things out of focus. This is useful if you want to blur faces of people or something like that. And the Sharpen tool does exactly the opposite. It's just going to increase the sharpness of the image. This is not the best way to sharpen images, by the way. You can use filters for that. And then the smudge tool, what it does is just going to smudge the image like this. Sometimes it's useful to retouching skin. Dodge tool, what it does is brightens where you paint. It's just going to increase the lightness on that. There's techniques. If you want to learn about dodging and burning, just look for tutorials on my YouTube channel. I have explained this technique, how it works. Then we have the burn tool, which does exactly the opposite. When retouching skin, these tools are really useful. And then we have the sponge tool, which saturates the image, which means intensifies the color, or desaturates the image. Where you paint, it's going to remove the color and go to gray or dark or whatever. This is the pen tool. I use it very often to make selections and make vector shapes. I will explain it on a future episode when I talk about how to work with vector shapes. Then we have the type tool, which if you just click on the image, is going to add false text here, the lorem ipsum. It's going to create a layer automatically for you. And if you double click the thumbnail on the layers panel, you will see the settings over here. You can change the font from up here. You can change the type, the size, of course. And this icon over here allows you to change the paragraph settings. Well, this is a character panel, allows you to change the space between the letters if you want to have all caps, like small text, and wow, just line height and things like that. So just play with that and see what it does. Next, we have the path selection tool. I'm going to explain this when I talk about vector shape. The same with this one. You can create vector shapes, and I'm going to talk about vector shapes and layer types later on the course. Let's delete that. And then we have this hand icon, which we never use because remember, we use the space bar. So when you click the space bar, you access this icon, this tool, sorry. And then we have the rotate view tool. Now, this is used to rotate the whole canvas. And remember, this is, if you save the image, it's not that you're going to save it like this. This is just how you view it. Sometimes it's useful to just rotate the view because sometimes you paint better on a different angle. And that's what is this used for. So let's reset that. And then we have the zoom tool, but we never use it. Remember, we use the Option and mouse wheel or Alt and mouse wheel to zoom in and out. And that's pretty much it. Now we have these two icons. As I said, the yellow one is for the foreground color and the blue one is for the background color. With this icon here, with the double arrow, you can shift the colors. It's a lot quicker if you use the X key. This other icon here is used to reset the colors to black and white, because black and white are very useful in Photoshop, especially when you're working with masks. So it's a color that we use a lot in Photoshop. By the way, you can also use the D key on the keyboard to reset the colors, and again with the X you can swap them. This other icon over here, it's called the quick mask mode, and if you click it, you will see that the layer turns red. And in this mode is used with the brush tool. So when you start painting, let me reset my brush to a normal round brush. When you paint with this, you can only paint with black or shades of black. You will see that it's going to paint red, and this is to create a selection. If I now exit this mode by clicking this button again, you will see that that thing that I painted. So this is another way of creating selections using the quick mask mode. You can enter again in the quick mask mode, and just keep painting and make your, or you can use this with a selection and now paint that. And when you go out of the quick mask mode, there you have your selection. So well, that's all I wanted to show you about the toolbar. You will get to know the tools as you work with Photoshop, so there's no point in explaining each tool in detail unless you need that tool for something specific, because you can do lots of things with all of these tools. So it's just a really quick introduction to see what you have at your disposal. So let's move on to the next episode and talk about selections.